Hello and welcome to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estridge. Each week I'll have the privilege of talking with some of the biggest names from the worlds of media, politics, and law. Nothing is off the table. I'll be speaking my mind and encouraging my guests to do so too. Today I'm joined by one of the biggest names in American politics. He's a pollster, a communications consultant, a political consultant. He's best known for developing talking points and other messaging for Republican causes. His work has included Newt Gingrich's Contract with America. He's been very active in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in terms of pro-Israel policies. He's just been everywhere. He's on Fox News, CBS News, CNN. He runs focus groups for the networks. He's Frank Luntz, and he is a favorite of mine. I am a huge fan of Frank's and have been for many, many years. And I'm just delighted, Frank, that you found time to join us today.
Well, I can never say no to you. You're living proof. I think we're both living proof that we can disagree on candidates, we can disagree on policies, but we can actually be significantly supportive of each other, particularly in very difficult times. Susan, you're one of the greatest human beings I've known in my career.
Well,
And
Frank, you're so
and
kind.
I mean this. It's a privilege. You broke the glass ceiling, and you did things that no one had done before. And so, just getting to know you has been wonderful. But getting to know you on a personal level, at a time when our politics has become more ugly and divisive and mean, is a privilege that I don't take for granted. So let's go.
Let's go. Well, you've been out there, Frank, in an amazing way about Donald Trump for years now. You've been out there. And right now, you've been out there. I've seen you on TV in the last 24, 48 hours, really taking him on, political suicide. What's going on with Donald Trump, Frank?
I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not, and I do not take sides. I'm not even convinced that I will vote in the presidential race this time. Frankly, I have issues with both candidates. But what I don't understand is why you would self-sabotage your campaign as much as Donald Trump has done. What I don't understand is that he knows, he must know, that his criticisms and his condemnation and the meanness by which he attacks her is beyond anything that we've had in modern American politics. This makes his campaign against Hillary Clinton a walk in the park by comparison. He clearly is agitated. He clearly feels that he's been maligned. When the issue agenda is so in his favor, when people care more about inflation than anything else, and they believe that Donald Trump handled it better, when immigration is the number two issue, and they think Donald Trump handled it better, when you compare the Trump administration to the Harris Biden administration, the Trump administration has the advantage, and yet she's now beating him, and she's beginning to win over the undecided. She's beginning to win over people who had voted Republican in the past. He sees that his lead has now completely been erased as of August 16, 2024. Every day he sinks further and further behind, and yet he does those things that makes his campaign intolerable to some voters and untenable in the overall system. What I like to say about the two candidates is that Kamala Harris reminds men of their first wife, and Donald Trump reminds women of their first husband's divorce lawyer. And that is not a winnable equation.
Why, Frank? He's got advisors. If he turns on the TV, he hears advice. If he picks up the paper, he sees advice. He's got advisors openly telling him from the Republican Party, stick to the issues, take on the record, talk about the economy, talk about inflation. He has all those groceries on the table yesterday, and he still goes off on a rant about what a lunatic she is. Why is he doing it? Is he
Because
unhinged?
he has no self-control. He never did. As he gets older, he gets angrier. He gets more indignant. In 2016, everything was about the American people. He was fighting for 300 million Americans, 310 million. In 2024, he's only fighting for himself. and more people have come to that realization. The issue now, because I do want to bring Harris into the equation, is that you don't vote in a vacuum. And that Vice President Harris has been able, in the 3 weeks that she's been running, to frame this as a choice rather than a referendum on Biden-Harris. So that's very smart in her perspective. The one thing that isn't, which Trump continues to do, although he does it so badly, is that he gives voters access to him through press conferences to hear what he thinks. She hasn't done so. She keeps the press at an arm's length. She's not answered key questions about her agenda that the public has the right to know. And if you're the front runner, with her so much more likely to win than him, you have to let people know the details. You have to let people know your successes and your failures. And probably most importantly, the last time she ran nationwide was 2020. She does not hold many of the same positions that she did then. Explain why they have changed. You will not be punished. Back when John Kerry ran, he was punished for being a flip-flopper. We've changed. We now want people to learn. We want them to grow. We want them to acknowledge where they got stuff wrong. And in fact, if you've been watching me on TV, that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. I thought J.D. Vance was a great pick initially because he added youth to the Trump presentation. Now I don't think it's such a great pick, and I've acknowledged so publicly. You'd be amazed that if you apologize, if you acknowledge you got it wrong, the truth shall set you free. Trump doesn't realize that, and Harris should if she's to be successful in the fall.
Tell me about J.D. Vance, Frank, because I didn't know much about him, to be honest. I had only, seen what I'd seen. And I've been through the vetting process of vice presidents a couple of times, and I can't believe they didn't come up with these quotes in the vetting process. What were they thinking of when they picked him?
They may have come up with the quotes and thought this is no big deal. Because
Childless cat ladies?
Yeah, but you know what? Trump says the same kind of crap. And this is what I don't understand. And I'm not going to duck your question. I'm going to answer it in a way that's even broader. Why must we be so vicious? Why must we condemn things that we don't understand or that we don't experience? People live different lives. They hold different philosophies. They were educated in different ways. They live in different homes. We listen to different music and attend different sporting events. We used to celebrate our individuality as a country. And everything I say to you, I'm going to be sending this to my West Point cadets because I want them to understand what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. I'll be teaching a class on this topic. It'll be called You're the Message. So I'm being very, very pointed and very deliberate in what I'm answering to you because it's okay to be different. It's okay not to go along with the grain. It's okay to say I made a mistake. So the fact that Vance opposed Donald Trump strongly and passionately 4 years ago doesn't mean anything because you learn. But what I don't understand is to attack someone because they don't have kids or to attack someone because they don't look like you or sound like you. We've known for 50 years that that's wrong. And we have sought forgiveness for behaving that way. And unfortunately, some politicians still do it even today. And it's really not called for. And you as a Democrat and me as used to be a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. I haven't switched sides, but just politics doesn't mean that much to me anymore. It's not the next election that matters. It's the next generation. What are we doing to this country or for this country right now that's either going to have a positive or a negative impact 20 years from now? As I get older, I get more concerned about the future, even as my future gets shorter and shorter, because in the end, I don't want to be responsible for destroying this democracy. Make no mistake, Susan, we are very much at the breaking point. And the ugliness and the viciousness that has entered into our politics could push us over the edge 80 days from now. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to believe it's going to happen. And on podcasts like this, I beg viewers, 80% of your listeners are going to be Democrats. I expect 20% to be Republican because you've been on Fox and you take a very broad-minded perspective on all these issues. Still going to be 80-20 just because of how we watch and how we divide.
Right.
But I don't want that 80% to think I only want Democratic podcasts. I only want people who affirm me. We need people. I want people, and we need people who inform us, not just affirm us.
Isn't that the fault of the media these days, too? I mean, I can barely watch television. I have to tell you, you do it all the time. I haven't done it so much since I represented Roger and took a lot of heat for that, Roger Ailes. But I watch television and it's just really like a sledgehammer. I mean,
Yes,
I don't know what's gone on with the media.
it's all because they're trying to get clicks and ratings and people to still purchase. And I understand that the business model for that is broken, but that's no excuse to break democracy as a result. I'm careful about what I say about the media because I'm on it so often.
Right.
We appreciate that they have a very tough job to do, but I love speaking truth to power. There's no greater thrill for me than to be able to say something positive about Trump on MSNBC or something positive on Harris on Fox. If we have the courage and the conviction to be truthful, and I did not always have this, and I acknowledge that. But now that I've got it, by the way, it's great to have a couple of strokes because if
I
you
was going to
survive
say,
that,
is this because of your health? You face, Frank
yes,
is a phenomenal human being and has faced some tough health issues. And two strokes is tough health issues. Has this helped
yeah,
open your eyes in some ways?
I didn't die. So you know what? It's not going to kill me. If I'm saying that Donald Trump is unhinged, which every listener to this podcast knows is true, whether you like him or not, whether you're voting for him or not, he is not behaving in a proper way at this moment in the campaign. I don't care what he does to me. I don't care what his supporters do because it doesn't really matter. What matters is that our children see us telling the truth, that our grandchildren are given a democracy that's sufficiently strong enough that it can withstand this ugliness, and that we leave a legacy of understanding and empathy and compassion, that we still fight for what we believe in, but we do so with respect and with dignity and not out of rancor, because in the end, you may be an opponent, you may be a competitor, but you're not an enemy.
I
And that's
agree
what we
with
need to
you.
remember. Yeah.
I have always agreed with you. And it is scary, I think, to see an unhinged man who doesn't believe in that at all as the Republican nominee for president. What do you do
But
about that? Can he get back hinged? I mean, this is a really scary prospect, this guy being in the White House.
but I don't want to use that as an excuse for the fact that the vice president, Harris, has not answered any of the questions about where she stands on so many of the important issues. By the way, by the time of election day, inflation will not be the number one issue. I believe it'll be immigration. What's she going to do with the border? What's she going to do with a fence or some sort of barrier? What's she going to do about people who get across the country? How's she going to keep fentanyl out and criminals out and people who come here the right way? How do they stay here? These are important questions the public has absolutely the right to know. And I think that, as I say, speaking truth to power, she is running a more positive campaign, a more fun campaign, as she calls it. But in the end, that's not what this is about. It's not about who delivers negative ads. It's not about who's enjoying themselves more. It's not about the size of the rallies, because as I've said again and again and again, size doesn't matter. Take it for whatever you want.
I agree with you. I've been on so many losing campaigns with big rallies that I have to tell you, the candidate gets back into the plane, says, "Did you see those crowds?" I think to myself, "Did you see those advanced people who worked like dogs to build those crowds?" And it just doesn't matter. I mean, it's a wonderful sign of enthusiasm, but it doesn't make a damn bit of difference.
So I want to turn this around on you for 1 second. Obviously, I'm a pollster. I ask questions. And I've got a question for you because you've been so active at the highest echelons of Democratic presidential campaigns for a long time. If you know that your candidate getting into the weeds on issues would do damage to their likelihood of winning, but you're also trying to elect a president of the United States to guide us for the next 4 years, would you have advised Vice President Harris, as she has done, to stay away from the press as long as she had done? Or do you think the American people deserve to know where she stands?
I think it's getting to be too long now. I think she was wise at the outset to stay away from the press because she wasn't ready. And this all happened so suddenly that I think I was going to ask you how she managed to pull this off in such a way that in 3 weeks she changed her favorability ratings, she changed everything. She was not a popular vice president. I've always liked Kamala Harris, but I've been alone in conversations liking her. And I've been surprised at how negative her, her persona was among, the large scale number of voters. But I think at first she was smart to stay away from the press because she didn't need them. They needed her. Right now, it's become an issue, and she's got to do some interviews and she's got to do some press conferences. And I think she'll be fine. But I wanted to ask you what you think, what has given her this magic that she's had? Is it just the timing? Did she have it all along? Has she shown growth since 2020? What is it?
So we know that her staff has high turnover. We know that the Biden staff did not think highly of the Harris staff. We know that other than on the issue of immigration, that she really wasn't called upon to do big things the way that George Bush called on Dick Cheney to do.
Right.
It's common knowledge. What has happened is that Donald Trump thinks everything has to be about him. And what he forgot is that in this campaign, when the camera spotlight is on you, you're losing. When the spotlight is on Trump, he's dropping. When the spotlight was on Joe Biden, he was dropping. The coverage is so negative right now from the press that it actually benefited you if you just went on vacation. Donald Trump doesn't understand that every bit of publicity isn't good publicity. This is not about selling a hotel. This is not about burnishing your reputation so that you can put your name on some other product. This is not even The Apprentice or any of the other shows that Trump has done. This is at a time when Americans are more afraid of the future than they have been in years, when they believe that Washington is so incredibly broken and irreparable, when they believe that they cannot afford the basics in life and they are falling further and further behind, and when they've lost a sense of safety and security. Everything I just said is a reason why Donald Trump should be winning this election, and yet he's falling further and further behind. Why? Because of Donald Trump. And Harris is benefiting from this by simply not being Trump. Everyone has surrounded her. They don't want another 4 years of what Trump is selling. And so they're willing to look past the weaknesses of the Harris campaign. And I think she's going to have a great convention. She can deliver a great speech. And the only way that this turns around is for an incredible debate performance on September 10th. And maybe we'll have a second debate.
By whom? An incredible debate performance by whom?
Actually, by the gentleman who has fallen so far. It's less important that she performs well. She and her performance will have a smaller impact than Trump. In 2016, it wasn't Donald Trump that people were voting on. I know he thinks he won the election. He didn't. Hillary Clinton lost.
Right.
In 2020, Joe Biden didn't win the election. Donald Trump lost. And in 2024, it's Trump's election again because he's made it that way. And he's asking the public for a referendum on 4 years ago. And just go back 30 days from August 16th. Trump was going to win that referendum. I remember the polling that we had, 39% thought Joe Biden's administration was a success. 55% thought Donald Trump's administration was a success. Trump was going to beat Biden, and he was going to beat him by a reasonably good margin. And how things have completely changed And Trump cannot understand how he can be shot, how he can have a convention, how he can clearly be the preferred president against Joe Biden, and now he's losing to this candidate, to this woman, as he would say.
To this woman. And it comes across clearly that he can't stand the fact that this woman is beating him.
Yes, and at this point, she's going to beat him, and he's going to claim that this election was stolen. Susan, remember these words. You cannot steal an election that you have already given away.
Is he giving it away right now?
Exactly, yes. And by the way, I need to give credit where credit is due. On the first joke about the divorce lawyer, that's mine. On this statement, that was Governor Chris Sununu, who has a better understanding of politics than almost anyone, clearly than anyone in Washington, D.C. Trump is committing political suicide right now, and the final act will be on September 10th. Let's see how he behaves.
And how do you think he'll behave? I mean, I can't imagine. I think this is really Donald Trump we're seeing, and that this is the man and he shouldn't be president. I mean, it's as simple and as frightening as that.
I can't answer part of that question because I'm no longer an advocate. And frankly, I just don't want to get involved. But on the other
But
part
how do
of
you
it,
stay uninvolved, Frank? Look what you're doing. I mean, you are involved, whether you like it or not.
I
People
am
listen to you when they're right to listen to you.
yes,
Donald Trump would be right to listen to you, but he isn't.
but they listen to me because I take an objective, and I've got the fly that was around Trump the other day, and the fly that was around Mike Pence is flying around me right now. There's one fly that insists on landing on Republican presidential and vice presidential candidates, and it has found me here in the Hamptons. I'm involved in explaining how the American people feel. I'm not involved in explaining how I feel. And that is a significant difference. In this campaign, I have deliberately sought to express the views of the public and not my own. So when I tell you that Trump is unhinged, this is what voters are telling me, as opposed to my observations. And when I say to you that they're not optimistic about what's going to happen on September 10th, it's not my point of view. It's what I hear in focus groups and polling. But once again, I do need to add that this surge that Kamala Harris has experienced will not last if she doesn't have the details, doesn't have the explanations, and is unable to put forward a coherent mainstream view of the role of government, of the role of the president for the next 4 years. There is some concern that she's too extreme. Politically, Americans are closer to Trump than they are to Harris, but they're much closer to Harris when it comes to personal traits and attributes. So my question is, does he stick to the issues? My question for her is, does she emphasize that she's a different approach to politics, the kind of approach that the American people would want to hear?
And what does she do to do that? I mean, what do you think about her choice of Tim Walz, for instance?
I don't want to break my rule. I know that if I know that my knowledge of politics, I would have gone to Josh Shapiro,
So would
because
I.
what she has to do is win Pennsylvania, and she's the next president. And no matter what you say about Shapiro or about Walz, Shapiro would have won Pennsylvania for her, and she does not know that about the governor of Minnesota. There are deeper issues here that I will actually choose not to go into. But that was of concern to
What
me.
kind of deeper issues?
The Middle East. It's something that you
That's
and
what
I shared. I
was
really,
worried
I just,
about.
I know what your show is called, and I really don't want to go there because that takes me out of the role of pollster, even takes me out of the role of prognosticator. And nobody is interested in my own personal views of the Middle East. I'm here to explain what America thinks and feels.
I understand. I just think, and I'll just say it and you don't have to respond or you can. I think it's tragic what's happened to Israel in the eyes of the world. And you and I are both strong supporters of the state of Israel. And I find it tragic that Israel has lost so much standing in the eyes of the world. It's not specific policies. It's that Israel is no longer viewed as the country that you and I both love. And I don't know what they do about it. Do you?
I think they have a problem with leadership that does not accept global public opinion and simply does not care what the world thinks, which is a mistake. I think that it's because of Israeli society having come apart, that they've got the same kind of polarism that we have, to the point where it's a 7 million person country. I believe it's 7 million, and they've got 250,000 people protesting every Friday. And the protests have started up again, even in the midst of bombs dropping from Lebanon. And the education system there is failing, and the social system there is failing. And the conflict between the religious and the less religious is as sharp as any Republican Democratic conflict here. They're in even more trouble than we are, because theirs is an existential threat.
Right.
And we still don't know what's going to happen with Iran. What we do know is they're in trouble, and they're in trouble right now.
What should Kamala Harris do about it?
Oh no, I can't. I don't talk questions. I don't do interviews off the record. I've never been in a source that asked not to be revealed. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
Since I get my information from the public, I'm public in my analysis. And I invite people who watch these focus groups. By the way, I'm going to make a plug for Straight Arrow News. It's a news site that has an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals. My focus groups appear on there. And
Really?
and what's amazing is, unlike these 90-second or 2-minute segments that you see on cable news or regular news,
Right.
they allow me to publish 30 and 40-minute sections. So you have to have time to be willing to listen, to hear what the public has to say. But I want the public to know what others are thinking. I want them to know whether they're in the majority or the minority. And they have allowed me to publish unedited versions of these focus groups, so the American people can really understand what the public is thinking, feeling, and wanting. And it has an amazing appeal. I'm very proud of it.
Straight Arrow News.
Yes,
That's the website.
that's a website, and the segment is called America Speaks.
And when are you doing your next focus group?
It just happened 36 hours ago. It'll be in the New York Times on Sunday. And it was undecided young voters, 27 younger, why they are undecided, what they're asking the candidates, what they want to hear from. And it was truly eye-opening. They are okay with Trump's policies. They're not okay with what they think Harris's policies are. Remember, these are the undecided, the last remaining. And they are okay with Harris in terms of how she communicates and who she is. And they are not at all okay with Donald Trump and who he is. So they like his policies and they hate him. They like her, but they're unconvinced about her policies.
So she's got a lot of policy work to be done. What about
Yes.
race and gender in this election?
Gender
People are
matters.
still talking about 2016 and how much it was referendum on Hillary and her gender and her persona. What do you think about race and gender in this one?
We asked that question of people who've switched to Hillary Clinton in the last 21 days.
Switch to Kamala Harris.
Switch to Harris, yes. And boy, young women love the fact that they can see themselves in her. They love the fact that they have someone closer to their generation. She's much older than people realize. She doesn't look it. She doesn't sound it. She's got that energy and that youthful enthusiasm. And young women are infatuated with her. And that means that they're going to come out and vote, because they wouldn't have if it were Trump versus Biden. They're going to come out and vote, and they're going to continue to vote down the ticket. So that's going to have an impact on the Senate races. It's going to have an
Hmm.
impact on the House races, on the governor's races. I'm starting to say to people that it is conceivable the Democrats win the presidency, the House, and the Senate. And should that happen, it is not because, in the end, of the Democrats putting forward such amazing candidates. It's the Republican Party and what it did at the very top of their ticket.
It's Donald Trump's default. What about the
Exactly.
abortion issue, Frank? How much is that going to cut for Democrats?
It cuts for Democrats, once again, among younger women. It was the only reason they had to vote. In fact, more younger women wanted to vote to ensure their access, wanted to vote on the abortion issue than wanted to vote for Joe Biden. That's how strong the abortion issue is, and that's how weak Joe Biden is.
Joe Biden had no choice, did he?
No, no, and I've known him. I taught his son Bo at the University of Pennsylvania back in 1989. I've known the family since then. I spent more time at Joe Biden's house than Vice President Harris did. I assure you that we got to know each other pretty well, and he would invite me to come up. And he's a really decent guy.
He is a decent guy. We used to call him Uncle Joe. I've known him since the 80s, and we called him Uncle Joe. He was the uncle you wanted to have, and he was a young guy then.
Yeah, and to me, when I first came across him back in the early 80s, he reminded me of Bobby Kennedy.
That's amazing. What happened? He just got old. Is that
He
it?
got old. That's all that it is. He got old, and we can see it. We can see what happened to him physically, and we're all getting older. We all look different. We sound different. We act different.
Well, some of us, you and I think, have gotten better with age. What can I say?
Well, I think, well, no, because you're always great. So I can't say that about you. And I know that, and by the way, I'm in a room with an 11-year-old dog that keeps the moaning and groaning every time I mention Joe Biden. So I think the dog feels as old as the president does. Um, we are who we are. We accept it. Hopefully, we're wiser, more thoughtful, less likely to anger, less likely to say things out of context that are mean and abusive. Hopefully, we grow to become better people. That's not always the case, particularly in politics. But I appreciate his service. I appreciate his commitment to the country.
Right.
He was going to
I
lose to Donald Trump, and he was going to lose badly to Trump, no matter what they think. And you can see the difference between the two campaigns.
Donald Trump isn't changing. Is
No,
he? Is there an intervention? What happens between now and November? Because if he doesn't change, I think he's going to lose.
You become a reporter. You're not satisfied with my answer. I can't do any better than this. So you're trying to get at it in different ways, kind of go around the camera, above the camera, below the camera. I don't know what changes him. I don't know how he ticks. I was in his presence, let's say 10 times when he was president. And of those 10 times, I had meaningful conversations with him half the time. And I was impressed about his attention to detail. I was impressed about his knowledge of the issues that we were discussing. I had assumed, as had been reported, as people want you to think, that he just got there as a fluke, that there was nothing upstairs. And there is. But he doesn't seem to be the same guy today that he was then. It's all about grievance. It's all about revenge. And he cannot seem to get it out of his system. Why? I don't know. It just is who he is. And if he doesn't figure this out, or the people around him don't figure this out, she's not just going to beat him by a 0.5% or 1% or even 2%. It'll be bigger than that. And we see it in the polling. The states that he was clearly up in, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, he's now even. The states that he was even in, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, he's now behind. And the states that had come onto the map that were considering him Minnesota and Virginia, they're now out of reach. This trend is going to continue unless and until someone gets him around the neck and says, sir, it's inflation, immigration, and nothing else. But
Nothing else.
I don't think that's going to happen.
And do you think, in terms of policy, what does Kamala do? Does she start holding press? She's giving a major speech on the economy today. I don't know if it'll be a major speech or not. She'll at least keep to her script. And I assume she will lay out proposals. I don't know what they're going to be. What do the people want her to say?
Well, this is a great way to kind of start to bring this to a close. First, she has to address inflation, which is, by the way, not inflation, it's affordability. I can't afford to fill my tank with gas, or I can't afford to buy the foods I want to buy for my family. I
That's
can't
exactly
afford a
right.
house, or I can't afford my health care. So that's number one. Number two is immigration, and it's not just what's happening at the border. It's that sense of safety and security. I know the numbers show that the crime rate has come down.
Right.
But if you're afraid that you're right, if you're afraid that then something out there is not being done correctly, and she has to explain how she's going to restore that sense of safety and security. And then number three, in dealing with the debt, ways for Washington spending, how you deal with the government, it is that phrase. I've said it already in this podcast, making government more efficient so it does more with less, more effective so whatever it does well, and more accountable so that the people who are working inside it know that they're responsible for delivering for the American people. These are the three areas that she needs to address. She can't duck them. And it's a wait and see whether she does it or not.
Frank, you are wonderful. I so respect you and respect what you're doing. And I so appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And give me the name of that website again where we can see your focus groups.
You'll see, and there are about 30 of them on there on different topics. You can see changes over time. Almost everyone is 30 or 40 minutes long. The segment is called America Speaks.
America Speaks.
And it's on Straight Arrow News. And listen, you're a legend. You're not just historically significant, but you've been active and involved at the very center of some of the most important efforts of the last 40 years. I wish I had a career like yours. I wish I had a voice. Actually, probably your voice is my voice is closest to yours of anybody's.
Right.
And unfortunately, every month my voice gets closer to yours. It is what it is. But I will never turn you down. I suggest people who happen to have stayed in this broadcast as long as they have to go back to previous podcasts, because you represent everything that is good about American politics and you represent everything that is great about American democracy. So this is an honor and a privilege.
You're a sweetheart. Thank you, Frank. You've been listening to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estridge. Thank you to Frank Luntz for being such a great guest and for all you do for this country. Tweet us at No Holding Back FM, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share the link on social media. You can sign up to receive an email when a new episode drops at our website, noholdingback.fm. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time on No Holding Back.